And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome from the great state of Florida, please welcome Jackie Simmons. How are you, Jackie?
I am delighted to be here, Coach Curl. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You've got a great story and you do some great work. So I'm really excited about this. I get excited about every interview, but I'm really excited about this one. So, Jackie, for my listeners, please share a little bit about the Jackie Simmons story.
Okay. Like all really great stories, this one has a pivot. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Okay. I was a single mom of 3, and at the end of the month, I could pay for the daycare or I could pay the rent. I couldn't do both. And I got lucky. Someone suggested I start my own business in my apartment, and I was highly motivated. I knew nothing about business, nothing about networking, nothing about anything.
Yeah.
Except I had 3 kids to feed and a roof to keep over their heads. I started my own journey into entrepreneurialism and the personal development movement just to solve my own challenges with chronic back pain, my own challenges with depression. And along the way, I discovered the crisis, which was that everything I studied, all of the certifications, and I am multi-certified. I'm basically certifiable. None of them taught me how to make a living. They taught me how to make a difference in an individual's life, but not how to build a business. So I ended up building a business around helping other people build businesses around what they were good at.
Oh, wow.
Until August 3rd, 2019. And that's the day that my then 37-year-old middle daughter, Stephanie, gave a 7-minute talk at my own event. I train people to deliver 7-minute messages that matter.
Yeah.
And she was the first speaker. She stood up and started her, oh my God, Coach, you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
Everything worked. The videographer was there. What was the right thing? Well, now we call them PowerPoints, but the slides worked, the microphone worked. The audience took their seats, and I'm super proud of my daughter. Oh my God, she looked amazing. Her hair was pulled back and combed. She had on a dark blouse and a flowery skirt, and she was in that nervous, excited state you get into right before you give a talk. I welcomed her to the room, front of the room. Everyone helped me welcome Stephanie Ashton, and people applauded, and she walked up confidently and shook my hand. And she started with 3,000 teenagers will attempt to take their own lives today.
Wow.
Just in the U.S. In the back of the room, I was stunned twice. First, I had no idea, Coach. I didn't know the number was that high. And I had no idea suicide was her topic. She continued with, when I was 14, after a bad day of shopping, I stood in my bathroom, and the pain of not fitting into any clothes was just more proof that I didn't fit in anywhere. So I took a razor and I cut into my left arm, trying to end the pain and my life. In the back of the room, I felt the blood just drain out of my face. Coach, have you ever been hijacked by a bad memory?
Yeah.
I'd lived through that with her, but we hadn't really talked about it. And in the front of the room, she continued with, it wasn't my only attempt. There were others. And outside of professional help, I haven't really talked about it, especially not with Mom. Mom and I had the other talks, the talk about sex and the talk about drugs. the talk about alcohol. And then I went to college on a dry campus. And that means the kegs were hidden in the showers of the girls' dorm. We had to talk about alcohol more than once.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk about suicide. And I still struggle with suicidal thoughts. Coach, in the back of the room, I went from pale to bone cold as my heart just sank. I realized the struggles that my daughter had faced alone because I didn't have the courage to talk about suicide.
Yeah.
30 years of stress management training, 30 years of professional everything for me is the only reason that I didn't just crawl into the corner of the room and start crying my eyes out. Stephanie wound up her talk saying, along my suicide avoidant journey, I've learned tons of coping skills. Now I want to teach those skills to teens before they need them. Yes, before they need them.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Coach, there was not a dry eye in the room, including mine.
Yeah.
People gave her a standing ovation. I mean, everybody stood up and they were rushing up and they were hugging her and thanking her for being so brave and so willing, so vulnerable. And in the back of the room, I was frozen. I was totally torn between pride for her bravery and guilt and shame for my cowardice. And then it hit me. 3,000 teens attempt to take their own lives every day. Coach, this means 6,000 parents start to live the guilt nightmare that I'd lived every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that means over 20,000 grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, and sisters start to live that nightmare. And hundreds of thousands of classmates, teachers, boyfriends, girlfriends, neighbors start to live the guilt nightmare, all probably just as blindsided by it as I had been.
I can imagine, yeah.
And then I wondered, what if Stephanie was right? Oh my God, what if how to stop teen suicide was as simple as having the talk about suicide and coping skills before you think it's needed, before your loved one starts to struggle with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
That's the pivot in my life, because what happened that day, after that day, Stephanie and I decided to work together. I mean, who knew that was possible?
Yeah.
Along with her sisters, we founded the Teen Suicide Prevention Society, and we started teaching grandparents and parents and brothers and sisters and friends how to start this talk, how to have the talk that bypasses the stigma, the judgment, that's not about waiting for signs.
Yeah.
It's just about having a talk about something that is so pervasive. The number of young adults struggling with suicide ideation has more than doubled in the last 2 years, according to the Center for Disease Control.
That's frightening, isn't it?
It's frightening. And the statistics vary. I mean, overall, they say suicide is down 1.5%, but that means death is down.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean attempts are down. It doesn't mean the people struggling are down. You look at any suicide intervention hotline or program, their numbers are up.
Yeah.
The challenge is that people are still so afraid. Well, heck, 23 years of basic silence from me on this topic, and my daughter didn't have just one attempt. I mean, over the course of that 23 years, she had a total of 14.
Oh, wow.
And what stopped me from having this honest, open-hearted conversation was that I was scared I'd put the idea back in her head. At some point, you'd have thought that I'm not the fastest puppy on the track. At some point, you'd have thought I'd figured out that she had the idea in her head.
Yeah.
But I had bought into the mythology that I could say something wrong. that I could do something,
Yeah.
that I would be the cause of her next attempt. And it's not true. The
Okay.
truth is, by not talking about it, I prevented her from having relief from it. So she was stuck with the negative echo chamber. But I didn't know how it worked back then.
Wow.
Now I know how it works.
So is that one of the keys in the programs that you do in the proactive prevention of suicide amongst, well, I'd imagine all ages, but especially teens? Is that one of the key things that people should be doing, having those conversations?
I'll tell you what, instead of giving you all of the theories and concepts, would it be okay if we just gave them a demonstration of what this is like?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, let's do
Cool. Okay. We train advocates for living, how to have the talk that saves lives. And all you do is invite somebody. So I'm going to invite you.
it. Okay.
Hey, coach, I'm part of the mission to make teen suicide a thing of the past. They gave me a guide. I need to practice it. Would you have a few minutes to help me practice my guide?
I'm more than happy to help you, Jackie. Yeah.
Thank you. Coach, it's only 4 questions. Are you ready?
Yep.
Question 1. Coach Curl, have you heard about the rise in teen suicides?
I've heard, and yeah, it's almost like its own pandemic in some ways from what I've heard. Yeah, I have heard about the rise.
Thank you. Question 2. Coach Curl, do you have a story? Do you have a friend who's tried or died?
Through my life, Jackie, I've had, I'm just off the top of my head, I've probably had 3 people who've taken their own lives.
Thank you. Question 3, Coach Curl, have you ever thought of leaving that way?
In all honesty, probably not. But because part of me, Jackie, sort of says I don't have the courage to do that, which is really a weird way to think about it. But I've never thought that the world would be better off without me, or that someone would be better off without me. I've always thought that every morning while I can wake up and open my eyes, I'm going to give it my best. So, yeah.
Thank you. Question 4. Why stay? What's your reasons for staying?
I've got people around me that I love, that I know love me, and I've just still got so many things that I want to do. I want to travel again. I want to run the London Marathon next year. There's just so many things I want to do. So I actually dread the day that I'm no longer here, because obviously I'm not here, and I hope that the things that I want done get done between now and then. So I couldn't think of, I fear death in so many ways. I fear that concept of me not being here, because there's just so much that I want to do, so much that I want to accomplish, and do that with the people that I love.
Another way to look at this, Coach, what's so good about your life that you want more of it?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, isn't it? Well, I don't know anything else but the life that I live, Jackie. So what's so good is that I've got the opportunity to live it. So I get choices. I get I have the freedom of running my own business, my own coaching program. I get opportunities to talk to amazing people like you through the medium of this podcast. So I don't know anything else but my life. So that's a good enough reason to be hanging around, I think. So
anyone watching this interview or listening to it, Coach, as soon as you started tapping in to what's so good about your life that you want more of it, what are your reasons for staying? Your whole demeanor changed. Your face lit up. Your voice changed. What just happened for you is that the neural pathways, the neural network in your brain that was invested in the grief over your friends who've died, into the awareness of the rise in teen suicides, that energy got pulled from that neural network and invested in a new neural pathway.
Yeah.
And this new neural network that you started building out has a label. And the label is reasons for staying.
Gotcha.
So now, if you have a normal thought, by the way, suicidal thoughts are normal, according to Sigmund Freud anyway.
Yeah.
So if you have a normal thought about leaving, it's going to hit this new filter that says reasons for staying, and it's just going to keep sliding right on through. It will stay transitory.
Yeah.
What happens for many people is that they have a thought of leaving, and because it triggers something, like for my daughter, it triggered this thought that she didn't fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
Then it gets stuck, and people are afraid to talk about it if they have a suicidal thought that hangs around. And they're afraid for very good reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
They, I mean, the top reason we hear, I don't want to be a burden on my family.
Okay.
I don't want them to worry. I don't want them to think I need to see someone. Now, I don't know about in Australia, but in the United States, if you talk to a licensed professional in many states about the fact that you're having a suicidal thought,
Yeah.
the law says that you have to be escorted to a mental health facility or a ward in a hospital for 72 hours, for 3 days, until you can be evaluated by a mental health professional to make sure you're not an endangerment to yourself. And the discretionary power is debatable.
Yeah.
I had the good fortune to interview the director of the Suicide Institute, which is in New York City. And he shared he had got a new primary care physician.
Yeah.
He went to his first appointment. You know what first appointments are like, right? They tell you show up 15 minutes ahead of time so they can give you the stack of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's filled it all out. He hands it to the nurse at the reception desk. She looks it over. Oh, this is fine. Are you sure you want to answer this question this way? And he's like, I'm not going to lie. The next thing he knew, he was in a wheelchair with an armed security guard on either side of him, and he was taken to the intake for the mental health ward at the hospital.
Wow.
Now, one of the nurses recognized him. This is the man who teaches clinicians how to handle suicidal patients.
Wow.
And he was being tagged with a 72-hour hold. Every state has their own name for it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of discretion, and there's a lot of fear and a lot of stigma. And that's what we knew we were fighting against. People are afraid to have the talk about suicide. So we created this guide that we just walk through together.
Yeah.
Because it makes it safe. It puts this framework around it that it's not about you personally. It's not because I think you're at risk. It's just about the talk and to find out, hey, has this touched you? And when you go to what are your reasons for staying, that flipping that switch in the brain, we call it suicide proofing. It puts a buffer between you and an edge you might not have even known you were near.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You ready?
Go for it.
Have you ever heard of something called mirror neurons?
Yeah, probably, but I couldn't tell you what they are.
This is what happens in the brain when you're listening to someone else's story. It's why stories are so powerful. When they say stories sell, facts tell and stories sell. It's because of this thing called mirror neurons, where when you hear someone telling a well-told story, you can see yourself in the story.
Yeah.
When I was walking you through the guide that stopped suicide, every single one of your listeners was being walked through at the same time. Every time you answered a question, they were answering the question. Every time you had a reason for staying, their brain was coming up with their own reasons for staying.
Yeah.
So thank you, because your willingness to be walked through that, you just suicide-proofed a whole bunch of people.
And you've just created an absolutely huge impact, Jackie. So that's incredible. And I'm really intrigued by, so many times governments put in policies that they believe are well-intentioned and they're for the safety of people. And what you've described about the 72-hour rule, I mean, two things that stand out, though. Suicidal thoughts or thinking that the world might be better off without you being there is something that can be considered normal. And in many ways, we need to open up those conversations and remove the stigma. But then we've got this other policy that sort of says, no, it's not normal. And because of that, we're going to imprison you for 72 hours to make sure you don't do anything that's going to be harmful. How do we change that?
The director of the Suicide Institute and people who are engaged with the intervention world, which is what that is, that's the realm of the intervention specialist. I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm a pure prevention focused, a totally proactive provider. And the reason is because what we realized, we couldn't find a program that was proactive. They were all based on answering the question, how do we stop suicide?
Yeah.
It's a reasonable question, but what it means is, who are they looking at? An at-risk population. Okay. Known at-risk populations, somewhere around 25% of young adults in America are known to be struggling with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
Cool. There's a whole mechanism, a machine. There's intervention phone numbers. It's all there for them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find anything that was focused on preventing the 75% from becoming 25, from going across that line. So we decided to ask a different question. Yeah. Instead of asking, how do we stop suicide? We started asking, how do we stop suicidal thinking from becoming stuck in someone's head and forming a negative echo chamber, which then could become suicidal ideation and put them at risk?
Yeah. And
that's the reason we came up with the talks that save lives. The 4 talks actually suicide-proof the student. We call it, you've been on an airplane, right?
Yep.
So every safety spiel that they do says the oxygen masks would drop and put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yep.
Our entire focus is helping you suicide-proof you. And then start suicide-proofing your friends and family. So while we've got the talk to stop suicide, that you could do these 4 questions with your friends and family, we found out that most people won't. And the reason they won't is they haven't put their own oxygen mask on first. They haven't dealt with their own tendency to self-sabotage, their own tendency to be bullied, even if the bully is internal.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, they haven't dealt with their own negative thinking, so they're afraid, like I was, to have the talk that stops suicide with someone else because it could be catching. It might be contagious. And what we know, one person takes their life, they are giving tacit approval to the people around them to do the same. So in that respect, it's catching.
Yeah.
And so we know the intervention specialists have that under control, or at least they're working on it.
Yeah.
We're over here. We want to help suicide-proof you and then help you suicide-proof other people.
That's an amazing vision. That's an amazing purpose. And how do you go about getting these conversations happening with people? What's how many people have you impacted? How many people do you speak to every year? Walk me through that, because I'm fascinated, and it's such a worthy thing that you do that I'd love you to be speaking to every high school student in America. So how do you do that? How do we make that happen?
How do we make that happen is through connecting with people like you.
Yeah.
How many people has the talk to stop suicide impacted so far? 56,642 last check. That's the number of people who've seen my TEDx talk.
Yeah.
And inside the TEDx talk, which is have the talk to stop teen suicide, inside that are these 4 questions.
Yeah.
So everyone listening gets the experience of answering those questions mentally.
Yeah.
We've trained over 100 advocates for living. And so the Advocates for Living training program is available. And we imagine a world where suicide is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
We envision having a trained advocate for living inside every company, in every boardroom,
Yeah.
in every school, in every classroom. Coach Curl, we want an advocate for living in every town, in every home. We believe that when an advocate for living is in every household, teen suicide will be a thing of the past.
Wow. That's such a powerful purpose. And, and hopefully the people listening to me today will be, or listening to your story and conversation, will become some of those most powerful advocates. I'll make sure as well, Jackie, that we put the link to the TEDx talk in the show notes, because it is something that is obviously needed, and we feel there's so many people that have felt the pain of, a suicide, whether it's a teen suicide or anyone else. And if we can have those advocates for living and be able to have those, that's such a simple questioning process that gets those thoughts shifting within people. So, and it's not overbearing, it's not creating a problem. One of the things we do here in Australia, and I don't know if there's an equivalent in the States, is we have what we call the Are You OK Day, right? Where people are encouraged to ask people, are they okay? And one of the challenges that I think that we have with that particular day is, what happens if someone says, well, actually, no, I'm not? And I think a lot of people have that fear then of, where do I go with that? Because you could fundamentally make that work. You could make that work.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
People are afraid to participate because they don't know how to handle it if it goes sideways.
Yeah.
So what we did is embedded in the talk is what to do if it goes sideways. Here's how we do it.
Yeah.
If someone answers yes to question 3, yes, they've had thoughts of leaving. And when it comes to, do you have reasons for staying? They say no. When you ask, what's so good about your life that you want more of it? They have nothing. If they have thoughts of leaving and 0 reasons for staying, we say, stay with them and dial 911. Dial your local emergency, not a suicide intervention hotline.
Yeah.
Dial and get an ambulance there. They need intervention.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that they may hate you for it, and accept that you may save their life.
Yeah.
Out of the thousands of conversations we've had, the thousands of talks that stop suicide that have been done, the number of people who have said yes to question 3 and no to question 4, 0.
Okay.
And the reason is because people who are struggling with depression or suicidal thinking are excellent at masking.
Yeah.
So they may not say yes to have the talk at all.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself says, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
But they're masking. And so they lie. When it comes to reasons for staying, they lie. And guess what, Coach Curl, you ready?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they lie, because their subconscious mind is hearing them answer the question, what are your reasons for staying? It's building out that file folder that they have reasons for staying. It's shifting their belief system It
Yeah.
is mindset magic.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have resources. Advocates are trained to offer resources that reinforce the positive thinking, that actually put positive images and affirmative questions and statements that get past the conscious mind and into the other than conscious brain. And we offer this as a free resource every time we have the talk. So we don't just have the talk and then leave them. We come prepared to have the talk that builds the buffer, and then build a bigger buffer, and then reinforce the buffer, and then get them involved in suicide proofing other people.
Yeah.
Because what do we know? When you know you're making a difference, when you know you're helping,
Yeah.
you'll stay.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just an amazing conversation. And one of the things that, I like that concept of, the subconscious going to work, because fundamentally that's what visioning is all about, isn't it? We envision success for ourselves, and we start to believe it. We've done it. And I'd imagine it's the same with that process of what's the reason for staying. If I'm going to try and bluff you, all of a sudden I'm giving myself some reasons, and I'm hearing myself with that. So the other thing that I can really tune into is that there were times in my corporate career where I really hated my job, where I just didn't want to be there. I thought things were going against me and whatever. I mean, there was always some negative times during anyone's career. And what I found worked for me was that we would do, in the organisation I was with, we would do centralised inductions. And I would always book in to go and talk to this fresh-faced recruiting team coming into the organisation and coming to work. And I'd stand there and as a leader in that organisation, I'd talk around all the positives. And then all of a sudden, I'd walk out of there feeling really good about where I am, really good about my position, and really good about the organisation. And it was almost like it was an intentional thing that I used to do just to make sure that I didn't wallow in, oh, woe is me and what's happening with me. And I also find that when I've got friends that come and visit me here in Brisbane, going out and suddenly going for a ferry ride down the river, and you're pointing out all these magnificent old homes that line the river, and you just suddenly sit back and say, geez, I live in a great place. And it's such a shift from what can happen when we get caught in the day-to-day. And it's very similar to what you share with the proactive prevention of suicide.
We need triggers. We're so used to talking about triggers as something that's negative. Yeah, we get triggered. What if you could create positive triggers, which is exactly what you just described, Coach Curl. You created positive triggers for yourself.
Yeah.
Most people have never even conceived of the idea of being able to push their own buttons or pull their own strings. And my company, Success Journey Academy, was built on that. That's what I've been doing with my one-on-one clients and my group coaching for decades.
Yeah.
I had just never thought of applying it specifically to the topic of suicide because I couldn't say the word.
Yeah.
The Teen Suicide Prevention Society didn't just happen.
Yeah.
We started out as the Make It a Great Day movement because I couldn't talk about suicide. Wow. It was only when I was doing my final script for the TEDx stage, and my TEDx coach, God bless him, he said, Jackie, you're going to have to tell the story of the day Stephanie tried to take her own life. And I'm like, Roger, there's no story. It was just a normal day. I don't remember. There was nothing unusual going on until nothing usual ever happened again.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but you got to tell the story. Can you ask your daughter? And I went, okay, sure, I can do that. I called my daughter Stephanie, and I was like, Stephanie, I'm doing the TEDx talk. I'm working on the script. And honey, I'm sorry. They want me to tell the story of your first attempt and that day. And I don't remember. Stephanie started to laugh. And she was like, Mom, it was the shopping. And I was like, oh my God, it was the shopping. And I was able to tell the story because anybody who's ever taken teenage girls shopping knows that there's always a story. Yeah. There's always drama when you're taking teenage girls shopping for clothes. But I had forgotten. And that's how the talk came about. It came about from my willingness to share that what tips the scale when somebody is struggling with suicidal thinking is not some cataclysmic event. We're not talking a major trauma. Yeah. We're talking clothes. For the story, I mean, we hear the stories now. Yeah. I've discovered, Coach Curl, that there is one in every room. Every room I walk into, whether in person or online in a Zoom room, there is one person struggling with grief over having lost a loved one to suicide, and there's at least one person in every room struggling to stay alive. Wow. And the truth, you can't tell by looking. Yeah. You can't tell. Yeah. The saddest words I hear are the 5 words. Yeah. Go ahead. We froze for a minute. Yeah. The saddest 5 words in the world. Yeah. We didn't see it coming. And I hear those really often. And the most shocking words I've heard are, they've been struggling. They've been seriously ill with mental illness, and their doctor never said a word to them about being at risk for suicide and never said a word to us. Wow. Just like medical doctors aren't prepared to, and one of my friends actually teaches medical doctors how to have end-of-life conversations. Yeah. Medical doctors don't want to talk about end of life, and the mental doctors are not trained to have the talk about the risk of suicide. And I think it's because they bought into that same mythology, that same elephant from Myth Island that I was writing, which is that I could put the thought in her head. Yeah. It's a myth. It's not possible to put a thought in someone else's head. It won't stick if there's nothing for it to stick to.
Yeah. And fundamentally, in so many ways, the thought's already there. And, it is about, one of the things that I know from working with a couple of great leaders is that you've got to replace a neural pathway. You can't remove it. It's there. No. And you've got to give it something else, and you've got to build that one to be stronger. And that's what I'm seeing in the advocacy that you do in the process, is that the neural pathway of living becomes stronger than the neural pathway of thinking the world might be a better place without you. So I think that's really important, and it's so relevant in so many things that we do. And, Jackie, I just wish you every success in this journey of yours. And I guess I really want to understand what is the vision that you want to encapsulate with what it is that you're doing. Obviously, you are having success. It's proactive success. But what would if I was to ask, what is the vision that you ultimately have? And I guess I've heard that already with the removal of teenage suicide. But what else is there what is the vision for yourself?
Imagine a world of radical self-responsibility where your emotions were your emotions. And that country song, You Make Me Feel, was an old joke. And we stopped believing that other people made us feel anything, that anything made us feel. And we took responsibility for our own emotions. Because when you own your emotions, you own your actions. Yeah. And when you own your actions, you own your outcomes. Yeah. And that's our vision for the world. Our vision for the world is people who are untriggerable. And sorry for anyone whose world exists around Madison Avenue and sales. I want to make people untriggerable even to sales conversations.
Yeah.
I want to make buyer's remorse a thing of the past.
Wow.
I want to help people understand that they can bring themselves to a place of discernment so that every decision is something that they can stand on without regret.
Yeah.
If I could make regret a thing of the past, Coach Curl,
Yep.
I think we'd be a long way towards making suicide a thing of the past.
Absolutely. Jackie, it has been an immense privilege of mine to be listening to yourself today. People listening, if they want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Teen Suicide Prevention Society.com, and they can find the TEDx talk there. And if they really want to make things like regret a thing of the past, we've got a gift for them. And the website is youcan'tdoitwrong.com.
Okay. Okay. You can't do it wrong.com. That is awesome. Jackie, as I said, an immense privilege having you invest in the leaders of today and the world from what I can see. So I really do feel honoured that you've spoken today with the leaders of today, and I wish you every success on your journey and vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you.